Welcome to TCM Talk Therapy. Hi, I'm Jen and I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine specializing in facial acupuncture, and I'm a face reader. I grew up in the West and practice in Eastern therapy.
Hi, I'm Grace and I'm a marriage and family therapist. I grew up in the East and practice a Western therapy.
Together we engage in organic conversations that bridge the topics we want to dive deeper in.
Let's get curious in finding compassion for ourselves, our bodies, and each other. The world's crazy, so
Yeah, the world's
gonna
really
talk about
crazy right now. And I feel like you can't help it because like every day there's something new. So I got my Batzi reading and she was telling me about how Yang Fire Horse is a year where like a lot of things get exposed. Like everything is there,
yeah.
but it's almost like hazy and you don't know if it's really real or not.
Whoa. I was gonna say, like, it's almost like you can almost see like everything and nothing at the same time because it, like you said, it's so hazy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Whoa.
So then
okay.
because of that, she was saying how you'll notice that like this year there's going to be a lot that comes to surface, including things like opportunities and like attention, influence, a lot of things
Yeah.
just kind of like surfacing. Even if you just look around you, right? Like people are not paying attention, but they're also paying
Nope.
attention, but they're also like hyper dysregulated. And I think
So
that's kind of the theme
dysregulated.
that we were just talking about just now, about
Yes.
how Young Fire Horse year, there's a lot going on about how things are revealing, and there's a lot of intensity, and there's a lot of dysregulation. So that's what I actually was taught in my recent Bazi reading from Dr. Tamsin Lee. She's from
Shout
Elemental
out.
Archetypes. Yeah, so she's amazing. She explains things so well in such great detail for millennials like me. Like it just makes a lot of sense and it clicks. So
I was gonna also add, like,
her.
I remember after you did your Bazi reading and you told me about it, Jen, like I was like, oh my gosh, you just had this like new wave of clarity of like, okay, this is gonna ground me, this is gonna be something I refer to throughout the year just because you already felt the fire horse energy.
It gives you a lot of great direction. Yeah. Because like the thing about like astrology stuff is that like you kind of already feel it. It's just a matter if you ride that wave of intuition, ride that wave of like opportunity, and you don't stay stuck in your old patterns. Because that's really what it does. It's just a clear telling of like where you're holding yourself back and what your luck opportunities are if you go through with it. And so that's why I love Batzi astrology, because it gives me a lot of clarity on that, and it helps me have like a very good footing for the rest of the year. It's the same thing with face reading. Face reading is also like, you see where you're holding yourself back in your face. You see what little ticks you have or like little deficiencies. And when I say deficiencies, I mean like complexion, circulation. Like if you have like a little patch where you always get a breakout, like it means something. There's a story going on. And that's what I always tell people. Like face reading is all about the story that happens on your face based on the emotions and experiences you have. So it just gives you a lot of direction.
Yes, and I've been telling more and more of my friends to like go to Jen for face reading. Just because like a lot of people, like this year is already crazy, already has that crazy energy, and I don't use that word lightly. And I feel like, if something is showing up in your body, in your face, you should find someone who can tell you what that means so that you can then work on it, instead of wondering like, oh man, like maybe should I get Botox because like my whole face is sagging. Maybe it's not, you don't need Botox. Maybe you just need someone to tell you like, hey, you've been holding a lot of grief. Maybe you need to move that grief somewhere.
Anger or
anger.
Or something like you're just taking care of too many people. Like there's so many things on the face that could tell you what's kind of like your pattern. And so once you know what it means, it gives you a lot more choice, and it gives you a lot more consistency of like, oh, do I have to continue operating this way, or is there a way where I can transform it into another approach? So it's all about perspective in a way, right? And that's what I love about face reading, and that's why I love using it to like guide my acupuncture practice. Because honestly, for like diagnosis, most of what I do is based off of my face reading. Second to that is probably pulse. to kind of gauge like the exact state of where your blood flow is, and like the pace of it, the chi, blood and fluid aspect of it. And then the tongue I often do last, or actually very minimally, because I feel like the tongue is
Yeah, I
actually much
noticed
better
that.
for internal. Yeah, but a lot of internal things I could already see in the face. Tongue I normally do like specifically for herbs. If I wanted to give somebody herbs, I have to see like the actual digestive quality. Or if something doesn't match up on the face and the pulse, I'll look at the tongue to confirm. But most of the time I could gather a lot of information from just like the face alone.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
was, and it's, I want to also point out, this is more than a party trick. Right? Like, and
Mhm.
the thing is, like, you know, when something as fun as what Jen has, which is like face reading or astrology or something like that, a lot of people think of it as like, oh, this is like, why don't you do it on me now, like for funsies, you know? And the thing is, it's like,
Mhm.
no, this is a real skill. And this kind of ties into the topic that we are talking about, because we have a mutual friend that kind of inspired this topic, that we both know pretty well. And that person, they reached out to Jen to do like a funsy face reading. Hey, do a face reading for me and my friends. And Jen was like, no. And they were like, well, it's okay, we'll pay you, you know, like it'll be a big thing. And Jen was like, no, I have a life, I have boundaries, and I'm not in not in the mood to do it, but also two, like you can't just pay me off to do something that I've trained and educated myself for years on doing. You know, this is an expertise of mine.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just when, you know, when me and
It
Jen
just
talked
gave
about
me
this,
the
it was
ick. At the end
icky.
of
It
the
was
day,
so
that's really
icky.
all it was. I mean, I'm pretty open, right? And I'm pretty,
Yeah.
I would say like overgiving when it comes to doing face readings and helping people out, but it's because I genuinely care. And I always want to help people just like have at least some sense of direction so they can choose the right thing for themselves. Not saying like what it is in my opinion, but it's really just like, oh, this is just what's showing up on your face. This is my interpretation of it. Do what you will with it. And it gives them
Exactly.
choice, and it gives them inspiration on how to approach certain things and how to like help them out of a rough spot. And I'm very happy to do that. But if it becomes something where it's like a party trick, then I get very offended, because what I do really is not a party trick. It's really like um it's a historical medicine, you know. It's an observational analysis, and it takes a lot of training in order to do so. And honestly, if you've done this before, don't feel bad, right? Like again, I
Yeah.
do feel very happy to do it when I find like that I'm inspired to do so, and like something really stands out to me and I want to. But if it just becomes something where it's like either one, I find that it's not serving you to keep coming to me and ask me things. And honestly, like you probably would have come to the same conclusion based off your gut. I'm just like, you already know what to do. I don't need to tell you. Most of the time, it's going to be like that. The other times, but if it's something where it was like the situation where it was just like, hey, do this for me right now. And I'm like, no. Especially if I haven't talked to you in a long time and you pull this out of
Yeah.
nowhere. And, you know, like I see that you're not really doing anything to encourage a change, I'll get upset and I'll get offended. And I think that's pretty safe and fair to assume that I would, or just my reasoning behind it. But this usually happens in a case if you're always playing victim and you're repeating your
Yes.
trauma cycles. And that's kind of what, and that's the reason why it inspired this episode today, because, you know, I have a lot of compassion for people. Grace has a lot of compassion for people. It's the reason why we do what we do. But if you come to us and you are stuck in your old patterns and you're not showing that you're trying to make a change, then what we do to help you simply is going to waste. And if we're going to be wasted on our efforts and our care and our compassion, then we just won't need it. It's not fulfilling anymore, and it's just taking. So that's where we have to draw our boundary as, you know, practitioners, to protect
Yeah.
our peace, to protect our space, and to really save that energy for somebody who is going to do something about it. But we want to actually talk about why it can be very hard to pull yourself out of it, and why the work we do often encourages people to pull themselves out of it. So this looks like things like self-sabotage. this looks like things like repetitive chronic
Mm-hmm.
illness. This looks like repeating same patterns over certain times of the year. You know, there's a pattern to it, and that's kind of like our job as practitioners to identify. But before we get into like what that all looks like, Grace, as everyone loves,
A good
would you
definition.
define? Yes, exactly. Would you please define trauma and how we are traumatized?
I love that so many of your clients came back to you, Jen, and was like, I really like Grace's definitions. That actually gives me like, I'm like so touched by that, because I'm like, oh, you guys like actually listen, one, but also two, like, you know, it gives like a very insecure part of me that's like, oh, language needs to be precise, or language needs to be perfect. And she's like, oh no, I can speak from the way I speak and people will understand me. So that's really, I want to shout out to all the people who gave Jen that feedback.
Yeah, and it was a good amount of people too. A lot of people
Oh,
actually came up to, I'd say at least 5. To me, that's a
oh,
lot.
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, to verbally get that, you know.
And also Jen and I both run off very like how do you say, like qualitative, quantitative, the one that's like very personal data. We receive that way better than like, oh, if you tell us like 90 people said that, we're like,
Quality.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
quality over
quality, we go by
quantity. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
any day.
Mhm.
And also, before I go into the definition of trauma, I want to just be very clear to reiterate what Jen said. we Jen and I are both practitioners and also people. Like, so we are going to
Mhm.
come in from both lenses. So you understand a little bit more about like, okay, when has a therapist hat on, she's able to provide so much more care, provide so much more empathy, have so much more space to give you that space to process, because you are paying for this service, you are paying for this time. I am providing this like, you know, vessel, this body of mine to be in service of you.
Yeah.
As a friend, I want reciprocity. As a friend,
Mhm.
I want relationship. So I'm gonna like, you already notice like the demands are slightly different, but that when you're a victim of trauma, or when you've been traumatized, or when you have relational trauma, it's harder to tell the difference between the two. So this episode's a little bit help you get a bit of clarity of like why Jen might say certain things about like, no, I don't do that for patients, or I only do that for friends, or why I would say like, oh, as a therapist I will do this, but as a person, as a wife, as a friend, I might do this differently. So I just want to
Mhm.
put that out there. There's two parts of me and Jen that you're getting access to right now, but you may not get access to if you see us in real life.
Mhm.
So let's go into a bit of trauma. Fun topic, our favorite buzzword of the year. When me and Jen talked about this, the way we define trauma is that your system is struggling to go back to baseline and is confused, quote unquote, confused about what quote unquote normal is. So baseline is meant to be when you're able to be regulated, your chi is flowing, your blood is moving through your system. That's what Jen's language would be. And then in my
Mhm.
language, it's like you're able to go into different emotions without shame or guilt. You're able to move between different states of being without feeling like, oh, I'm unable to go back, or I'm unable to move forward, right? So there's this thing called the stress cycle, where some stress happens and you get activated, and then after the activation, after the event is complete, you're supposed to go back down. You're supposed to bring your heart rate down. You're supposed to stop breathing as shallow. But in the world we live in, we interpret, like our caveman brain interprets an email as like, high alert, a lion is here. Now, back then, as cavemen or cavewomen or cave people, we can say, oh, the lion is gone. Oh, that was just a shadow. We're good now. We can go back to sleep. We can go back to eating. We can go back to hanging out with our village friends. But now, because we get like one email and then a text, and then we're driving, and then we have to think about groceries. Oh, and then we read the news, and then we're on social media. Oh, wait, we have to do a billion things. Just notice how fast that is compared to a lion showing up, looking at you, not thinking your food, walking away, right? So a lot of things happen beyond our brain's capacity to process information and to understand. Now, we're adults. Now, bring that back to when you're kids, where a lot of things happen and we don't have language we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the capacity to understand. So childhood trauma that's why it feels more impactful, and sometimes that's why it lingers in our system so much more, especially if our parents didn't have the language for it, our parents didn't have the capacity for it because of their own trauma. And then that leads into intergenerational trauma and all of these things that we can spend like days just talking about. But and so the two key takeaways in this episode is, one, you're not able to move between states as freely. And then the second thing is the speed of how you are traumatized and the impact of depending on when the trauma happened. So as a kid, more severe. As an adult, still can be incredibly severe, but less so. But the speed at which we are exposed to trauma nowadays makes it really hard for us to get back to baseline. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to point out that there's a few things you mentioned that I really wanted to speak on from, one, a face reading perspective, and then two, from a TCM perspective, traditional Chinese medicine, right? So let's talk about face reading first, since we were already on that topic before. So in face reading, you actually can see the ages on the ears as like from the ages of 1 to 7, but they're flipped on male and female. So 1 to 7 on the ears, and then the other ear, it's like 7 to 14. Then the forehead line, like the hairline, that's your teenage years. Then the upper forehead is like your early 20s, that goes down to like the eyebrow portion of the forehead, which is like going into like late 20s into your 30s. The eyebrows are your 30s. So when it comes to trauma, especially childhood trauma, anytime you see a little pinch on the ear where it almost looks like the cartilage is missing or it's not as full or plump, usually that's an indication that there's a deficiency there, or if there's a part of your ear that always is red on the outer border of that outer cartilage into the earlobe region, if there's always a redness at one specific spot, that could actually indicate an excess at that point. And again, like, face reading is only possible because it's kind of like where the stagnation is during that point in your life. So, for example, you can see like a thinning of the cartilage. That usually will be an indication that there was such an overwhelming amount of stress in your circulatory system during that point of time of development that it didn't allow for that area to plump up. Now, of course, there's like genetic predispositions, and like your ears might look a certain way because of like how your parents' ears look and stuff like that. Yes, that definitely is a factor too. But overall, there usually is an indication, especially if you see like your mom's or dad's ear looks one way and your ear looks a little different. Usually that could be an indication of a deficiency during that point in time. And then when it comes to Chinese medicine, the way that we see trauma in particular is based on, did you sleep? Did you eat? Were you able to rest? Right? Like that balance between that state of like, oh, I was able to experience a stressor, but I can still go back to my baseline of health. So I usually say this to a lot of patients, and I say like, like we can't control what goes on around us, but we can control how we react to the stress individually, at least. Right? So we can't control things around us. We can try and do our best with how we react and how that affects our chi, our blood, our fluid circulation internally, and how that affects our mind, body, and spirit. So that's when it becomes like, okay, there could be something really stressful going around you. You can be chased by a lion, but yeah, like Grace said, you don't know like the speed of it, right? You could be exposed to multiple things at once and not even realize it because it happened within like 10 seconds.
Yep.
And all this stuff gets downloaded into the brain, and this could affect certain levels to the body. This is when it could affect the upper, middle, or lower burner of the body, where the upper level is like your heart and lung function. The middle section is your digestive function, your detoxing function. And then the lower is kind of like where things are stored on a much deeper level. This will start to affect your reproductive function. So a lot of people with things like sexual trauma, for example, that gets stored in the reproductive system. And it makes it a lot more difficult to maybe get pregnant, or a lot more difficult to maybe have good quality eggs. Like these are things that could occur obviously male and female both, but still it's like really important to understand that these traumas are really just like intense stagnations that cause an overwhelm of disruption to the energy and blood and fluid dynamic. So we call this like shock.
Mm.
It can affect it, right? Or it could be an extreme amount of grief or an extreme amount of fear. So it's usually an overwhelm of a particular emotion, and wherever it gets stored in the body, whether it's your liver, your spleen, your heart, your kidney, your lungs, it could be anything, but it's often something that disrupts the whole chi dynamic.
Yeah. And I want to add on to that is like, as someone who deals with just mental trauma, or people
Mm-hmm.
come to me thinking it's just mental trauma, like the high correlation between like health issues or gut issues or autoimmune issues. Shout out to that episode with Jiaming. If you have autoimmune issues, please listen to our episode. But there is a high correlation between trauma done to your body and health issues. And I want to also tack on even mental trauma. So like emotional abuse, emotional like gaslighting, being in the wrong relationship, having really toxic friends, like, you know, all these things, it does show up in your body eventually. Maybe it won't show up immediately, and maybe it'll show up 10 years later, and it manifests in the form of like heavy migraines. But these imbalances, these traumatic events that you think happened to you, and notice the word think happened to you, it actually is staying in your system because you never had corrective experiences. You never owned it. You never sought out healing. You never thought that it would impact you. And you never reflected on the fact that this particular, for example, particular trauma has spilled out into your relationships, into your marriage, into your your children, into
Or
your
even just actions and
work.
decision making, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's really the main factor of it, is like these traumas, when they're not processed and you're held in that stagnation of it, right? It's stuck, it's not processed. You're not moving with it, or not trying to, I shouldn't say trying to, or you're not given the opportunity to address
Mm-hmm.
it head on, whether it's because you yourself didn't talk about it, or if it's because you weren't financially able to have the support
Yes.
to be able to have that opportunity, or it's a complete denial of mental health. Like there's so many levels of where it could occur or show up, right? But it's a matter of like, okay, once you do see it though, are you going to make a choice of staying stuck in it? Or are you going to try your best with the right support to process it, move it, transform it, find meaning in it, and bring a new perspective into your life rather than just staying stuck in the trauma?
Yes. And that's something that me and Jen have been really, really reflecting on, sitting on when it comes to planning this episode, is this question of like, how do we help folks who are victims um,
Mm-hmm.
move away from victimhood and move
Mm-hmm.
towards surviving, moving towards being a survivor, and beyond surviving, how do we help them thrive? Because
Exactly.
and that's what Jen said, like, you know, like sometimes you just need to survive, sometimes you just need to be in that job for a couple more months, even if it's toxic, even if it's causing you stress, because you need the financial ability and you just need that extra time to decide what to do next, but you're aware, and now we help you cope, right? And then you finally quit that job. Like, how can we help you then move towards like, okay, this is what you're good at, can we keep doing what we're good at to then make a living out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many layers to moving from victimhood into survivorhood that I don't think we are going to focus on today, but just know that when we talk about this shift from victim into survivorhood, this is very scary. This is the first step, and that moving from a victim where things happen to you to a
Mm-hmm.
survivor where things happen to me but I still can overcome is a huge mental leap, huge financial leap, and doesn't come
Huge
easily.
relational leap too, right? Like, because it can feel very isolating. And right now, I'm actually talking from personal experience, right? Like, I used to be the type of person in my 20s where like everything was me, 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 me. It happened to me, like this thing affected me. That's why I am the way I am. Accept me for who I am or leave. I used to have that mentality. But then, as you grow older, and especially once you have children, you just realize like, that's no way to be. There's no room for growth in that mentality. And so once I started to kind of work through my traumas and like really understand that compounded effect of it, where it's like, I didn't think I was traumatized. I really didn't. I thought I had like, just an unfortunate event after an unfortunate event. And, it's just things you move on and, it affects you and it makes you a certain way and you just kind of deal with it. But that's a very like backwards or stagnant, I should say, type of place to be in mentally, because then it doesn't allow for room for growth. It doesn't allow for shifts in perspective. It makes you think of things as like, this is how things happen to me, not how are my actions and decisions affecting the things around me. What steps can I take, especially if it's something that's treatable on a physical level, right? What are the choices I can make to improve my quality of sleep, quality of digestion, hormonal influence? What are the steps I can take to make sure that that doesn't generate the same type of reaction every single time? How are ways I can communicate with the loved ones around me to let them know, like, hey, like I'm not doing great right now. Maybe I'm PMSing, right? And, things I say during this period of time, just know I really don't intentionally mean that. And I'm still actively trying to work on balancing myself out and finding out what rhythm that means. But please give me grace during this time. Like having that emotional type of connection with a partner or like a family member or friend during that time can really impact the way that they see you and give you grace, which you honestly probably feel like you need, right? And that leads to like blaming or like, oh, you did this when I was feeling this way. How could you? You knew I was going through this. You knew blah, blah, blah. And that's when you could have like every single excuse in the world, right? But at the root of it, it's like, well, you just weren't feeling great and you reacted. So, like, what can you do?
And that, something I've thought about, Jen, as you were speaking was, I actually asked my supervisor once. I was like, a lot of my clients who have a lot of complex trauma, they say like, oh, I'm so unlucky. Oh, I'm so unlucky. This happened to me. Every week it's unlucky. I'm like, as a therapist, how do I work with luck? Because I can't control luck. I can't control how the world will function. And I sometimes, yeah, some people are unlucky. So what do I do about that? And this is when I started thinking also about ownership of like, can I own my unlucky parts? And what would that look like? And maybe the unlucky part is the part that blames your parents, for example, right? So you feel like, oh, it's so unlucky that I have parents who are like not emotionally in tune with me. And yeah, it is luck. You didn't choose to get born into this family, and you didn't choose your parents, but you can choose how you react with them. And this is the leap that we are talking about. When you start saying like, hey, I don't feel heard. Hey, I don't feel listened to. Hey, I don't feel like I belong. And then how the other person reacts is on them. That's also scary. And that's the scary part, where you start to change and your environment starts to shift. Because the hope, the lucky hope I hope for, was when clients say to people they don't feel comfortable around, it's like, hey, I don't feel comfortable. I kind of want this to change. And then the other person, in theory, hopefully should say, oh, thank you for telling me that. I will adjust accordingly. I'm still going to be myself, but I'm so sorry I didn't notice this earlier, right? Like very there's a lot of self in the other person that they're able to recognize like, hey, I did something wrong, but also I can't apologize for who I am, but there's still room to change. There's still room for the dynamic to move. There's less stagnation, as we're talking about. Now, usually what unlucky looks like is like, oh, I changed, I asked for more, but the other person doesn't change. So you tell your parents like, hey, what you did to me when I was 10 years old was horrible. And your parents like, well, I don't remember that. Well, that's on you. I think like you were the one who pissed me off. you were like, you didn't listen to me and this is what you get. That already shows like, oh, that's stagnation. That the
Yeah, I mean,
relationship
if
is not
even when you hear
changing.
it, right? It's very cold, it's very rigid. And then in Chinese medicine, like cold is literally like a stagnation pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stagnation, rigidity, inflexibility is also a form of stagnation. So when it comes to words and like verbiage, language that is a choice, like there's a stagnation there, a clear stagnation there, which again is like, I don't want to say is fixable, but when you approach it from a mindset of like, okay, this is cold, how can I warm it up? Right?
Yeah.
How can I warm up my tone? How can I become more flexible? Like these are things that I, at least mentally, that's my approach, right? Like I'm finding myself, let's say I'm talking to my children and I find myself becoming really heated, right? And I'm getting really angry and my voice sounds a little more like fiery, like a little more sharp, a little more intense. I'm like, how can I soften this now? I have to mentally, as an adult, make that conscious choice as a parent because I know it will affect my children if I don't. If I don't do that, I have to figure, if I do follow through with it because I reacted, because everybody will, I have to make a
Yeah.
conscious choice of repair, right? I have to consciously be like, oh, what mommy said before was really messed up. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Like that's my job as a parent too. So like when it comes to like that victimhood of like blaming parents for everything, it doesn't allow you to give them a humanized experience either unless they're willing to change or
Yeah.
like
And
willing to
that's
own up to it. That's why ownership is such a huge part of it,
yeah.
right?
That's the distinction that I like Jen and I really want to be like clear on. Like if your
Mm-hmm.
parents are unable to change, that is also a sign. And if your parents are able to change, that's great. But also if your parents are unable to change, it's not on you to fix them. It's also not on you
Exactly.
to cut them off.
Yeah.
There are solutions, there are ways to get along with your parents, and without giving up all of your desires as well. And it's different for each person. And that's really, really, really hard to determine if you're always listening to other people and seeing like, oh, that story is similar to mine, that person did this, therefore I'm gonna follow them. Or, oh, I saw two different solutions, but none of them really fit me, but I'm gonna try one anyway. And so this is where I'm like, it's on you to own your story, to own your relationship with your parents, and own for you to decide what you want to do, because there are so many ways to relate to people beyond just we are super close and we are completely cut off and we are far apart. And that's
Yeah.
also a trauma response.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm I'm actually okay with sharing this now. Like I personally did that myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grace knows this. Only my kind of inner circle of friends really are super aware of this. But I made a conscious choice of cutting off my parents and a majority of my family members from my life at the time where I was 28. And it was a very conscious decision at that moment. There was a lot going on. And if we're talking about like one thing after another thing after another thing, and that
Mm-hmm.
compounded effect, yes, there was a lot of that. And it also was very quick. A lot of things happened at the same time. So the reason why I chose to cut them off was for my own good, in a way where it was like, I wanted to give myself the space I never was allowed or was never granted. And it was in a way like a chance for me to kind of like see how things would go if it were just my decisions, if it was just my own voice. And it took me a long time to find out what that voice was. But in the beginning, I found myself being like, no, everything's because of them. Everything that is terrible is because of them. And it made me very angry inside and it made me feel very stuck in grief. But then once I started working on that more, I started realizing like how many times I didn't choose things for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
knew something was wrong, but I went along with it anyway, even if it didn't align with how I truly felt morally or in terms of like values or in terms of like how I would have approached the situation, because I was never granted that. And if I'm an adult, I have that conscious choice now. And it took me a long time to even realize I had choice. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, like my distance is more so about like just being able to be me without the influence of how I am under their guidance. Because like it's really interesting the way that you are when you're with your parents or like around certain friends that were quote unquote more toxic. And like I could have been the toxic friend too, right? Or I could have been the toxic family member too. And there's definitely times I would have done that. But to not take ownership over my own actions was what was making me stuck. Once I started taking more ownership over my role in how things panned out, like it became less of like, oh, you did this to create things this way. It's like, no, actually, I had a huge part in it too. And now I can easily say that because I gave myself the space I needed in order to come to that decision. And I think that's a huge thing too. Like a lot of people don't realize that when it comes to victimhood, when it comes to trauma, like if you're constantly immersed in it, there's no outer perspective. If you're not approaching help from an objective party, there's no way to gain a different perspective because it's only from your lens or it's only from their lens. And you can't get that objective view of like that bird's eye view of like what really happened, which is why I think that like therapy is so beneficial, because it just gives you an outsider's perspective on the situation that, you know, could have been interpreted wildly differently from two different parties. But you just couldn't see that because you were living it and you were in a stress response and you were not moving through it. You were stuck in it.
One, Jen, I love that you're sharing this and that you're putting yourself in a vulnerable state of saying this out loud. But I also,
don't get me wrong, my heart's beating fast.
I know, I was gonna say like this is a huge moment for Jen. And also I want to just like take a moment to acknowledge, like when it comes to estrangement, one, a lot of people come to me for like estranged family members, and it's very, I am really honored to hear about this, because I think that it takes a lot of bravery to do something like this. And it's never an easy decision, even if society says that it might be, even if your estranged family members might put it as that, oh, like, oh, they suddenly cut me off. No, it's usually a very, very thought out, reflective decision. And it's a choice. I think that's also really hard to bring when it comes to trauma. A lot of trauma causes you to feel like, oh, there was no choice. And sometimes there wasn't, and that's okay. It takes a lot of compassion to also be able to say, at that moment when I was this age, or in that moment when I was faced with this sudden decision in my 20s, I didn't react the right way. I didn't have the right choices. I didn't know what I didn't know. It takes a lot of compassion to have grace for those parts of you. And then it takes a lot of compassion to be able to now say like, okay, I don't want to do what I did 5 times in a row that I did over the past year. What choices do I have and how do I make them? And that's again, huge leap. Takes a lot of compassion to tell the critical voices in your head to not be like, oh, that was stupid. You should stay stupid, right?
You know what's interesting?
Car noises.
Car noises,
Perfect
they're
timing.
very interesting. So, you know what's interesting? Like just kind of reflecting on my own life right now. And I'm just going to do it because I'm going through this from like a vulnerable side and also a Chinese medicine side. But it's not that I hated everybody and I wanted to cut them off. It was actually just like I developed a greater love for the family that I was growing and for a newfound love for myself, an appreciation for myself in a way I never did before, where I just wanted to make the right choice for me. And it was very strange because it felt very selfish, right? But then for me, it was mainly because like I saw the potential of what I could have, and to not risk things to experience that new taste of what family could look like for me, what love could look like for me, what potential I could become. That when I was weighing things out in my mind back then, again, a very stressful time. I didn't have much of an assuredness, but it was just this thing eating away at me internally. And you could say that this was like that spirit whisper, where it's like that part of me where it's like, if I don't get a chance to experience this, I will live life with regret. And I didn't want to live life that way. So, I mean, who knows what'll happen in like 10 years, 20 years, but
Who
at
knows?
this moment in time, like I'm very happy with my choice because I got to experience a version of me I never even knew existed. I got to experience a relationship that I found was like so magical in a marriage and in a parenthood and in having children that I never knew my potential to be. So it was really interesting. Yeah, I want to reiterate just the fact that like it can make you feel like there's no choice, or
Yes.
it feels like
Yes.
a bad choice, I should
Yep.
say,
Because the
every
word
time.
the keyword there is selfish, right? Like it
Yeah,
feels
yeah.
selfish when you're so used to thinking about what your parents wanted for you, what your family expected of you. Um and just to like highlight this part, there's a very practical part to Jen's story that if you feel like, oh wow, like I want to be able to do what she does, a very practical part is financial safety and emotional safety. And
Which I had
also,
both of, I
which,
have to
yeah,
say.
she had
Yeah.
both of that, and also another driver, like her kids
Hmm.
were the
Hmm.
like that
Or
last
my
tipping point,
husband, like just
or your
somebody
husband.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes yourself isn't enough, and that's okay. I want to give that
Hmm.
like permission that like, oh, I waited till I had kids and I made the right choice for myself and my kids. That's okay. Sometimes we just
Hmm.
need that extra push. But if you're able to do that for yourself before someone else, it can feel incredibly selfish because I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
well, I don't have kids, I don't have a husband, or I don't have a partner, or I don't have friends that I'm doing this for, right? Like it just feels very icky. And like Jen said, it doesn't feel normal.
Hmm.
But what you think is normal, what you think is baseline is trauma. And that's not healthy. That's not sustainable. It's sustainable for a short amount of time because there's usefulness to stress, there's usefulness to cortisol, there's usefulness to having fight or flight. But long
Yes.
term, the impact on your system, the impact on your body, the impact on your relationships, the impact on yourself is not worth it. It's not worth the unluckiness. And that
That's
is
actually
hard.
where I want to dive into like the physical, like symptomatic type of attributes, right? Like if we're thinking five element theory now, when it comes to Chinese medicine, this is when we say like fire transforms things into earth. It's building a new foundation. Fire is very dramatic, it's very chaotic. It's literally like wildfire. When there's an extreme amount of it, it's very intense. And it literally can burn a whole forest down, right? So it could feel like it's completely breaking you down past your breaking point, and you don't even recognize yourself anymore. That's pretty much what happened to me. I literally had no clue who I was, but I knew that the version that I was becoming as an adult was not the type of adult I wanted to be. So I literally like transformed everything. I even moved across the country, like I
Mm-hmm.
started life completely anew and I built up from literally nothing. Um, but because I had that fresh foundation of a brand new everything.
Brand new soil. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, literally like brand new soil. Like it required that amount of intensity for me to be able to be where I am today. I don't believe that everyone needs a brand new slate, because I do think there's a lot of room for communication and growth if the other party is open to it
Yeah.
and actively trying in a way that is not re-traumatizing you or bringing more blame, bringing more victimhood, and really just not taking ownership over it. I think that's the biggest part. It's the ownership part. If there's ownership on both sides, I think there's incredible room for growth. And I don't think it requires this big of a change. But in the situation I was in, it didn't look like there was going to be. And again, right, like this is only my own perspective, right? But
Mm-hmm.
given the situation that I dug myself into, I will take full ownership of that, right? I dug myself into a hole that was so deep. There was absolutely nothing I could do in my own mind at that moment in time other than transform things drastically. And that's the way I did it. I'm not saying it was the right way. I'm not saying it was the wrong way. I'm just saying that's what my capacity was at that moment in time. If I went into it with the mind I now have, it might have looked different. But given that that's what it was, this is the life I've built based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's room for change too. It's just a matter of like where I am in life, where other things are in life, and does it make sense? So
Yeah.
this is something that I'm going to be working through the rest of my life, but I know that because I did all of this, it's not going to impact my children.
Mm.
So that's the reason why that was my fuel to kind of help with that. And that's kind of like when you use that fire to transform everything, I don't get palpitations the way I used to anymore. I don't even have circulation issues the way I used to anymore. My body runs warm now. I don't sweat nonstop from my armpits and palms and soles the way I used to, because I transformed the fire aspect, which is all related to the heart and small intestine. My gut is so much stronger. I can digest food now. My face is not as pale as it used to be because I have blood now. My periods are a lot more regular now. Like, it really did transform a lot physically in my body. I used to never have an appetite. Now I do. Like, there's so many things that transformed on a physical level that now I'm like, I'm literally not the same person I was before. So then knowing that when it comes to dipping my toe back in, I honestly have no feeling like I need to, because I'm not the same person anymore. And then it's a matter of like how things approach in the future, my relationships, my friendships, my connections, it's all going to be based on the person I am today. And I think that presence is really what makes victimhood and trauma and that inability to take ownership really difficult, because sometimes it gets muddy with like what version you are at that moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Am I my previous 20-year-old self? Am I my current 30-year-old, 33-year-old self?
Oh my gosh. This like goes into like this makes me think about parts theory, of course, IFS
Of
theory.
course. And I kind of
course.
want you to dive into that more, because we've mentioned it a lot on this podcast already about having different parts of yourself. But let's throw in another definition moment, right? Like, what is parts theory? Why is it so helpful and so impactful?
This is what I usually say to clients, like to explain the framework I work with, is that we have an authentic self, and then there are parts of us that come in because of life, like perfectionistic parts, traumatized parts, depressed parts. You know, they're just different parts of us, and they're parts. You know, it's a part of life. It is what it is. You know, there's no, there's no, I don't know how to say it other than like changing them. You know, unless they want to be changed. So
right,
the thing
right. That's a different story, right? Especially when it comes to like couples, marriage counseling,
oh my gosh,
stuff like that, right? Like, there's a clear want of change if you're going in for couples therapy, right?
Yeah, it's always about the other person. It's never really about you. And if it is about you, you're like, oh, but I can't really help it. You know, this is who I am, right? I think something when it comes to parts to remember is that trauma creates disconnection from your parts. Like, for example, I love using extreme examples because I feel like it sticks in people's brains the most.
It's a lot more obvious, yeah.
It is. So I think the example I use, like if you as a kid you experience, for example, a really bad round of abuse at age 6, for example, then you just stop thinking about that 6-year-old part of you, because you're like, that's too shameful, that's disgusting, that's like, you know, like I wasn't in control. I also needed to rely on my parents, so like after that event, like I kind of like, you know, like pretended like nothing was okay and that everything was okay, like nothing happened, because like I needed that relationship to my parents. But then fast forward to like, let's say you're 36, and then we start working together, and I realize like, oh, when you're angry or when you are hurt, you'd start lashing out like a 6-year-old would. And that's something I noticed as a therapist. And I point that out, and you're like, actually, yeah, I haven't thought about this event when I was 6-year-old. So notice that disconnection, but also notice how a lot of therapy work is reconnecting with parts of you that you didn't want to connect with, or you never thought you needed to connect with, or parts of you that you thought like, oh, they were doing the best they could, but it wasn't helpful. Like, for example, a very anxious part, trying to take care of everyone but you, freaking out. And that's why she brought you to therapy. That part of you brought you to therapy. But then when we start to work on the anxiety, she's like, no. I'm not the issue. Like, this trauma back here, she's the issue. Or like that depressed part back there, that's the issue. But notice how the anxiety, the anxious part, she's the one kind of like puppeteering everything. And she's the one making your system tense up. She's the one that's like, if things don't go the way I want it to, then we're unlucky, right? Right? So at the end of this, when it comes to this kind of work, the key point I want to bring in is like compassion brings that connection that heals trauma. And I want to just point out this very, very big point that when I notice with a lot of trauma, when I work with trauma, especially Asian women, especially Asians, I'll say just Asians as a whole, we are very critical. We have a very critical culture. And so we have very
and this is
strong,
across Asia, like literally across Asia.
like across Asia, like
the
we
whole
are
continent.
the whole continent. Like, if there's one thing really uniting us as a whole continent, is the biggest continent in the world, is we are very critical. We are very sharp people. We have very good observational medicine for that reason, right? And critical thinking is prioritized. But when it comes to trauma, when you're critical about your trauma, it doesn't actually help you. So notice how when you are tough on yourself for not being more gracious, it doesn't really work. You're not actually practicing that compassion for yourself. And then when we are compassionate on ourselves, when we are being quote unquote selfish, then we feel like, oh, I'm being soft. If I'm being soft, will it actually work? If I'm being nice to myself, will that actually create change? No. All I know is I have to push. I have to be tougher. I have to be sharper. I have to be smarter. When, that 6-year-old part of you just needed like a little hug. And because we believe in tough love, it's hard for us to give that love to ourselves, because that 6-year-old part is a part of you.
Yeah, especially if it's like, it's what you grew up seeing. It's what you know as an expression of love, right? Or it's an expression of like how to approach life. It's what you've seen your whole life. It's what you've been told your whole life. Like, it's hard to not do it. It's like breaking a bad habit, Old habits, they die hard. It takes a lot to undo all that learning, that learned behavior and that learned processing. But that active choice of rewiring the way that you approach it, or you accept it and give yourself grace, or like approach it with a different lens, approach it with a different action, approach it with a different perspective of decision making. Like, it's a very tough but doable thing. It's like you learned how to speak Chinese growing up, and now you learn that you got to start speaking English, like, it's possible.
Yeah.
You just got to learn a new language in a way to,
I love how you brought up
life now.
I love how you brought up speaking Chinese, because all of us who know how to speak Chinese know that the only way to learn Chinese is rote memorization and drilling it into your system. And rarely, I don't know anyone. If you had to, I don't know anyone who has had a good experience learning Chinese. So if you did, please let us know, so we know the tricks of learning how to like enjoy the language of Chinese. But no, it's
terrible. I hate teaching it to my kids. I don't know how to expose it to them without just throwing them in,
Yeah. And
I haven't figured that out at all. If you know, please let me know your trials and errors.
Please do, because I also want to pass it on to my future kid, like the joy of learning this language that is so rich, so much history, so much, and it's so expressive and poetic.
I think it's the poetic nature of it that's really lost in translation. Like, when I think about the names of the points in acupuncture, it tells me so much more about the function of the point than actually reading the description of the points. Functions, because it's like the poetry of it all.
And then
It's
something that we've talked about too, of like, we just don't
yeah.
have words for it in English, so we're trying our best to like use 20 different words in English to express this one small thing in Mandarin or Chinese that like what? Like,
It's so hard to
yeah,
convey. I mean,
yeah,
it goes for any language, right? Like when I hear people talking about like these popular Korean shows, they're like, yeah, they translate it well, but like it's not the essence of it. I think
yeah,
that's what's lost is like the essence of the meaning behind it. And I think that's a lot of like trauma work too, at least even from me, right? Like, cause I do a lot of treating emotions simply because I work on the face. Like your emotions, your wrinkles, your circulation of what goes on aesthetically on your face is strongly impacted by your emotions and experiences, which is essentially like trauma work, right? Which is why a lot of
yeah.
people who come to see me, they have big releases. They'll start feeling a certain way. They'll start crying sometimes. They'll start feeling energized or they'll feel like totally wiped out for days and they'll think about things they haven't thought about in a long time. But I think that Chinese medicine is interesting because it's so good at treating emotional stagnation
It
for a
is.
culture that doesn't talk about emotions at all.
You know what? I think that's why we developed it, because we were like, we won't talk about this, so but we know the effect it has on our body, so let's
Mhm.
move this along. And it's okay for me. I'm like, look, if somatic healing or acupuncture is what you needed for that release, for that next step, go for it. If therapy is what you
Yeah,
need
but
to
that's
talk it
why I
out, go
feel
for it.
like when you combine our
Oh
forces,
my gosh.
like the potential for growth just escalates tenfold. Like it's just
I
so amazing
Yes.
seeing the people we've treated simultaneously, like the way they started and then the way they end up like just within months or a year. Like they're a completely different person.
So if you hear this and you're like, I haven't worked with either of them, please come work with both of us. Like,
Yeah.
not no, but this is the selfish part of me, like, speaking, because I love working with Jen, but then two, like the
Shameless
work that
plug.
same shameless plug, like, because when me and Jen get to work together, one, we share the same language of each other's work now that we spend so
Mhm.
much time together, and also the joy we get to see when our shared clients become more and more themselves, like go back to the
Yeah.
essence of who they are, and are able to work with different parts of them. Oh my gosh, it is such a joy. Like, we both are just like, if you are a shared client listening to this, know that this is about you, because this is so good. Like, we just love
Yeah.
seeing how you have transformed yourself in a
Mhm.
beautiful way by going back to who you are, reclaiming who you are, owning who you are, and even the shameful
In
parts,
every level,
every
right?
single level.
Not just on a level of like, this is who I am, accept me for who I am. It's also like, these were the ugly parts of me that I've now come to terms with. These are the brilliant parts of me that I've now realized. And now with facial acupuncture, you look the way that you actually have the potential to look. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like there's so many levels, layers of how much you can be you that we take so much pride in. And it's like when you go through the ugly moments, you have the support to be able to help you
Yes.
get back on your feet. Because we're not perfect beings, right? None of us
No.
are. There's going to be times when our ugly sides come out
Yeah.
and we work with it. You know, we really try and guide in a way where we just want to have you going in a cycle where you're in a growth pattern. It's not about doing the right thing. It's not about
Nope.
being the best person. It's
Nope.
about that generating cycle, right? So, at least for me, like that's my
Yeah.
whole approach. I want to
I
keep
agree
you
with
in
that.
that generating cycle. If you get stuck, it's okay. There's something we can do. It just feels a lot more proactive. And I think as like results driven people like you and I,
Yeah, we are. We have very strong goal oriented parts.
yes. Where we just want to see change and transformation, but it's because
Yes.
we find joy in transformation, whether it's like in a way where you have to really find the deepest, darkest parts of you and unveil them, but we can hold your hand along the way. Like we find a lot of joy in that. What
So
we don't
much.
find joy in is if you keep doing that and keep expecting us to hold your hand and make that your crutch.
Yep. That we don't have room for in our personal lives anymore, and so it's been
Yeah.
really hard to maintain certain friendships out of that. And also that's something
We're showing our petty sides.
we're showing our petty sides, very selfish sides in that way, but I have love for those parts because this is something that I'm bringing in a very personal part of me that I may not share in therapy if you're in therapy with me, but I'm very comfortable sharing, is that some people just aren't serving me anymore. And in my work, I do a lot of caring. I do a lot of giving that if I don't get to take in my personal life, I can't do this work. And I love this work a bit too much to sacrifice myself. And therefore, I've had to sacrifice friendships. Like friendships who don't serve me, friendships who don't understand that I have changed. Because
I think that kind of ties back into like our boundaries episode, right? Where it's like we have to make very clear choices for ourselves. And it is something that we're still learning and we're still growing and we're still trying to make sure we understand.
And we're allowed to change at any time.
Yes. Yeah. And so like I think that's growth though, right? Like change equals growth. Whether it's growth for the positive, growth for the negative, it's still a version of growth. But it's just a matter of like, now do we see people aligning with our growth or straying away from our growth?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a very interesting episode. It became a lot more vulnerable than I intended for it to be.
I know, right?
I feel like it kind of healed a lot of parts of myself. Like I really felt like in the beginning my heart was racing incredibly fast when I started opening up about my life, but I feel very settled. And I know that's because of the work I've done and, the safety I find in Grace and the safety I find in the idea that my story can help others at least find some curiosity in their own stories. I think that's more impactful than like me keeping this to myself,
I think you experience that feeling I get. So when I think about sharing parts of myself in session, or like really important parts with like groups or like strangers even, I have this feeling in my system that I'm like, if I don't speak, I'm wasting an opportunity. And so I always honor that part of me because it doesn't come often. And when she comes on, like that intuition of this one particular moment comes on, if I don't say it, I missed out. But also when I do say it, I just know it is so worth it. And it does, I don't know, it pays off. Like, and it comes with listening to your parts and not pushing her away. Because I can be like, you know what, that's a missed opportunity, whatever. But I've learned that if I listen to her, the generosity and the vulnerability of that brings so much more connection.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you're in that generating cycle so that you could operate out of abundance again, right? And I think that's what we're really getting to, is that like if we keep doing things that deny our like fuel of like joy, of helping, then we're not technically operating out abundance, and that's not going to bring quality.
No.
Right. And then the flip side of that too is that like one thing I really wanted to point out was that repetition also creates safety. So I've experienced enough times now with Grace that I can be safe sharing my story. And that's why it took so long to get to a point where I can share my version of the story, although it's obviously a very big summary, but it's scary, right? So, but I know that I'm safe enough with Grace to be able to share this now.
Yes. Yeah. So have compassion for yourself, have compassion for your parts, and also take the
ownership.
Hope. Yeah, the hope and ownership that even if it takes a long time, it's not impossible, something a lot of clients say to me, I don't want to end on this note, something a lot of clients say to me is like, like I figured this out, like why can't I fix it? And I'm like, you spend like 40 years, 50 years, maybe 60 years of your life being stuck in this stagnating cycle or stuck in this trauma, and we just spent 6 months. It's gonna take a lot longer to rewire our brains to find comfort in something different. And that's okay.
And the younger you do it, the easier, seriously. So like don't feel like you have to be like experience everything before you can address it.
Yeah.
And then, but at the same time, it's like, even if you're older, it's okay. You can still address it. There's no like timestamp of like when you can and when you can't.
I like that. There's no timestamp on ownership. Just if you start today, amazing.
Yeah.
If you start tomorrow, that's okay too.
Yeah. But it's just easier on your brain to address it earlier. Just
it's
like
easier
how it's
on Jen when she treats you.
Anything. Oh my god, too funny. Yeah, it's true. We just speed up the process, but it's not always easy. Yeah,
no,
it's not always easy, and I think that's the main takeaway is that like staying a victim is actually safer in your body because then you don't have to go through all the hardship. But once you make that choice of not taking that victim mentality and really taking ownership of your decisions, your actions, your part of whatever the story is, it really generates room for growth, it generates room for compassion, and it generates room for connection that you never would have experienced before.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's a small little act that helps other listeners discover our show. And if you haven't already, click the follow button to make sure that you don't miss the next episode. Lastly, connect with us on Instagram at TCM Talk Therapy. We love hearing from you. Thanks, and tune in next time for more TCM Talk Therapy with Jen and Grace.